Hi, friends. Hello, good evening. Welcome to the Neighborhood Conversations education series. This is the third in our series. My name is Owen, and I'm part of the Equity and Inclusion Committee and the Neighborhood Conversations group, and just want to give a shout out to...
Or talk louder.
Yes.
Yes, it's Owen.
Caw-caw, caw-caw. I just want to give a shout out to the other organizers of this, which is Jess in the back, and Julie, and Cindy, and Lisa. We have been, this is really a culmination of these community conversations that we had in October and really listening to what people were eager to learn more about in our community. And so last month we had a great legal overview with Joe Strain. Next month we have folks coming in from the Restorative Justice Program, which is part of the Vermont Court Diversion Program, to talk to us about how that works and answer questions that we have about that. And today I'm super excited that Kel Arbor is here from the Vermont Pride Center and Vermont Cares, is going to talk to us about harm reduction and answer some questions and give some overview about some overdose interventions. And it's such a treat to have you here. Thank you so much for being here today. So with that, welcome everybody.
Thanks so much, Owen. I don't often use mics because I'm a very loud talker. My name's Kel Arbor. I use they, fear pronouns. I direct the health and wellness programs at the Pride Center of Vermont and have recently, with all the national HIV cuts and the defunding, have accepted a new hybrid role with Vermont Cares. So I'm going to be back rurally working across this region and 2/3 of Vermont with Vermont Cares, and I'll talk a little bit about their work as we go through the day. They are the largest syringe service program in the state, doing mobile and fixed site syringe services for people using injectable drugs, for people using hormones, for people that are looking for resources to harm reduction. So I am psyched to be rejoining them, but I'm here today in my Pride Center hat. And I also DJ the queer dance party over at Babes, so I love Bethel. I live in Montpelier. A few things that you should know about me as a person is I'm 47. I look much older than I am. I was assigned female at birth and grew up in rural Maine. So I grew up in rurality, and that really resonates in my heart with it's very different than being in a big city, what happens in small towns. I am queer as the day is long, and I'm also HIV positive and almost died with an AIDS diagnosis. So there's a lot of intersections in the HIV work that we do in the communities, and poverty is at the core of every issue, and we have so little institutional power in those conversations. So I'm really excited for this model because we do have power in this room collectively. So today we're gonna, does this work? There we go. Mercury retrograde is happening. Today we're gonna cover, Owen and I chatted about some what are the things we wanna cover in a harm reduction part of your ongoing series, and just what is harm reduction and why do we do it? And we're gonna start with one of the harm reduction strategies that we're using in Vermont called naloxone. It's the overdose prevention nasal spray for people experiencing an opioid overdose. So we're gonna start there and start with one of our best tips, and then we'll get a little bit more into why do we do it and a little bit more theory and practice. We're gonna talk about addressing stigma. We're gonna talk about overdose prevention and the naloxone basics, and we're also gonna talk about access to support and services. I do a lot of outreach work in the community everywhere I go, and I love a catch and release game. I don't know everything, thank goddess. I cannot serve all of your needs and don't do emergency work. What I can do is know my local resources, and I can just send them information, and that is something we can all do. So I hope you all leave today, in your hand you have some of the state's resources, just info to share. And even with people that don't necessarily need the services, might need the information, because there's a lot of stigma happening in Vermont right now. So let's start with naloxone. It's also called Narcan. We use the word naloxone because Narcan's a name brand for the drug naloxone. Naloxone is the drug that kicks the opioid receptors off of so that you can breathe again. So you're overdosing because you can't breathe, because the opioids are oversaturating your receptors. There's a lot of science and great videos out there, and in the larger pamphlet that the states put out, there's a lot of QR codes, and they've got great videos on like recovery position and like a 3-minute video on how to administer naloxone. We're not gonna go that deep today. I'm gonna give you like some basics, and we're gonna chat about like what really actually are the issues around naloxone access. And we also have a service, Vermont HelpLink. Vermont leads the nation with the hub and spoke recovery model for opioids, and that means we have a lot of rural access, and getting to folks without transportation in rural pockets is really important. So the state is putting out ever-shifting resources, and one of the ones that they have is a quick guide to naloxone. Does anybody, you came in with the sandwich. Did you? Oh, but Jess gave you a, great. Sorry to, thank you for eating. So the state puts out this really great pamphlet. They do that because in the package, within this box is 2 of these. That box costs $75 at the pharmacy for 2 doses of naloxone. Everybody's life is worth more than $75, okay? Like, we should have more free access, and we have a lot of great free access. So nobody should be going to the pharmacy to buy naloxone in the state of Vermont. We have so much free access, including Babe's Bar across the street. Having it to hand off to somebody else is a great strategy. I've never administered naloxone. I've given out hundreds and hundreds of doses into the community, and it's community saving each other is why overdoses are diminishing with naloxone specifically. So it's not very likely that you as a random person are gonna come across somebody and administer naloxone. Maybe, but that's less likely than someone who we know is using opioids overdoses. There's a really sad story about a family in Vermont some years ago that a doctor did a really good thing and gave the parents, after this young person already had an overdose, gave the parents naloxone for next time, if it happens again. Did not tell the parents that inside this package are instructions. The parents did not know to open the package, and they watched their kid die. That's the extreme of what lack of information can do. This is a very easy medication to administer. A 2-year-old could administer this. It's a nasal spray. It's not harmful. There's no harm with this Band-Aid. We should just get it out there. I heard from a buddy last year in Providence, Rhode Island. They're going door to door, asking people to have naloxone in their house, just in case. Why not have Band-Aids here? Why not? It's temperature sensitive. Don't keep it in your car. If it's in a bag, make sure it's coming in and out of your car. We hear that a lot with condoms and naloxone and things. On the back, it has both a temperature range and an expiration date. So if it expires, just go get a new one at all the places that we're gonna give you resources, including syringe exchanges. But I love that Babes has it, and we have been distributing naloxone, geez, for at least 3 years at the bar with the pop-ups. We've given out hundreds of bags to the community members, sometimes street medics and folks that are living super rural, that in 3 to 5 minutes, if I can't breathe, I might die. And if I'm waiting an hour for an ambulance, this literally could be life-saving. There's really specific things we want to look for to make sure somebody's actually experiencing an overdose and not just sleeping. So this is happening in Barrie, that the fire department is receiving an uptick in calls because there's people sleeping, there's people tired, there's just people out relaxing. I don't like the way this person looks, right? Stigma. They must be unhoused and an opioid addict. I'm calling the cops, I'm calling the fire department, someone needs to get them off the street. I don't think that's the accurate response, and neither does the city. And so the fire department is liaisoning with Vermont Cares to do some education in the community. Years ago, San Francisco trained their community on CPR. Great, really helpful. Except if you're sleeping on the train, you could actually really hurt somebody with CPR, right? So The appropriate response means that we need to come in cool and chill and not freak out no matter what's going on, which is really hard if somebody's unconscious. So in this little blue booklet, let me find out what page it's on. There's a check for signs of overdose. Number one, person is unconscious or not waking up. Things you can do, you can talk loudly to them, you can rub your sternum really hard on their chest, you can pinch their skin really hard. If you can see a rise and fall of their breath and their chest, if you have a little mirror and can put that in their airflow that you can see a little bit of a fog, sometimes it can be hard to tell if somebody's unconscious, but if they're not responsive, they might be unconscious. So you might hear noises if they're not breathing normally, that death rattle that we sometimes associate with overdose, gurgled breathing, like you're having a hard time breathing, because what's happening is the opioids are flooding your breathing receptors. You can't breathe because there's too much opioid in your system and you're overdosing. So you need to be able to get that opioids off of your breath receptors, and that's what naloxone does. It comes in like a wrecking ball and knocks them off. It doesn't last as long as the opioids. It has a shorter lifespan, so we'll talk through that in a minute with and after you give it what to do, but the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure they're actually unconscious. And call 911. We have minutes, right? And so when we call 911, we don't say person experiencing an overdose. We say unresponsive person. They're unresponsive. And keeping it neutral. If you say certain things like opioid overdose, the police are immediately brought in, and you don't know if a sheriff, or we have mounted police forces in Vermont, there's other folks, ICE is all over our state right now. You might be flagging people more than just the ambulance if you call 911. So we just tell folks be as simple as you can be with your language. They're unconscious. And then give the naloxone dose. You might need to give some rescue breaths. I'm my own stage kitten. Because it's a nasal spray, if there's a clogged pathway, it's not going to get to where it needs to go. So you might need to give a couple of rescue breaths, and the state in a lot of their kits is including, because especially with COVID, we want to minimize oral saliva-to-saliva contact, just a mouth barrier to do those rescue breaths. Rescue breaths are not CPR, and the state does free trainings. The videos are, again, in that little red book. They'll have that as one of the visual demos. And then you don't press the little plunger. That is a very quick little, you just hold it to the sides and then you just put it in as far as your knuckles there and give the dose. And this is I think it's 4, let me double check. These are 4 milligram doses. When the EMTs come, they titrate in very small increments. So what's really hard is that you have to wait a couple of minutes before doses. So you give the first dose, and then you have to wait a couple of minutes. That can be really stressful. If you're in a buddy pairing, you could be administering the naloxone and somebody's calling 911, delegating tasks in those moments. If you can, use all the hands you have. After you've given the dose, putting them in recovery position, which is this little after naloxone page. People could vomit and choke. If somebody's sitting in a chair, it's you don't really want to move people if they're unconscious, really support their heads. Our heads are really heavy and it doesn't take much to bobble us. So if getting them down to the ground off of a chair is going to be safer, again, if you have a couple of different people, don't move them if you don't need to. If they're tilted down, the nasal spray might just drizzle out. So if you could tip their head back at least enough to get the medication to their brain. If you can get them into recovery position, that's ideal, but again, like calling 911, giving the naloxone dose. If it's not an opioid issue, it's not harmful that you've given them the naloxone, and we have protection in Vermont for folks that both call 911 and administer the Good Samaritan laws. So again, just make sure it's actually an overdose, that they're unconscious and non-responsive. We don't see a lot of folks just giving naloxone to people. We do see folks, though, sort of freaking out and giving lots of doses of naloxone. They're not getting all those doses, right? So you're like sort of wasting the doses and giving them so much. And then when those opioids swing back down, it could be like an extra hard crash. So again, think about like this is a heavy dose of naloxone at 4 milligrams, and the EMTs would barely come in at 0.5 milligrams to bring them just enough up. So stay calm. The booklet is really like step by step. We have little kits with all of it in there, and that's one tool and strategy in harm reduction, is to just make naloxone available and give it out to folks. A lot of our public libraries are now distributing naloxone bags, and those ones come also with fentanyl and xylazine test strips. There's a few different reasons why we're seeing a lot more fatal overdoses. Part of it's fentanyl, which is a very strong opioid that's about 100 times stronger than heroin. We've always been a heroin state, Vermont. UVM's a top 10 party school. People with more money buy more drugs. So again, this like poverty stigma that we see people without housing assume they're all junkies. I don't use that word. Like, they're people. I don't know what their situation is, but to point at them and shame them and say you're a drug user because you don't have housing, that's like, why do you need to do that? Like, there's so many other things to plug into. So this has been a great way to get people plugged in with, hey, I want to do something, even if it's just have naloxone on me so that I can give it to my friends. One thing that I wondered from the group is, who is at risk for an opioid overdose? Who do you all think is somebody who might overdose on opioids? Anybody? Yeah.
I did once when I had knee replacement surgery.
Knee replacement.
I was given an opioid and woke up completely unable to breathe. And had the nursing folks not come in enough time, I probably would have been out. But I'm in everybody, right?
Right.
Everybody is susceptible to being given an opioid at some point for medical reason, as well as the other reasons out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sort of in that vein, people who have a low tolerance. So
Yes.
this can mean people who've never used an opioid, but also it can mean people who are in recovery.
Yep.
Because they have developed a tolerance over their time using. If their disorder recurs, they will go back to using often at the same dosage that they were using when they first got into recovery, and it can overwhelm their system.
Definitely. And people that are not in recovery and in detox, like institutional incarceration and other incarceration, that they're detoxing because they're not, it's good. They're detoxing because, not by choice, not in a recovery setting, but because they don't have access. And yeah, the test strips are a great way. Knowing your dealer, knowing your supply train. When the dealer goes to jail, everybody's supply is now at risk for outside sources. And so it is harm reduction to know your source. It's harm reduction to test your drugs. I think about stimulant users all the time with fentanyl. I think about how many stimulant users who use cocaine. I think about restaurant workers who work long days. And pills and powders are never pure on the street. So having the narrative that if only opioid users are gonna need naloxone, that ain't true. So for me, bar access is really important because I know restaurant workers are stimulant workers, and so somebody might be at the bar needing the naloxone, but it might be the worker. And then I'm distributing to a whole network of folks that might be recreational partying. Alcohol, benzos, and opioids are about a third of fatal overdoses. We don't think about alcohol as a drug. Alcohol tenfold amplifies your cannabis. So alcohol is something that, and then prescription drugs. Like you were saying, I had a friend who said, don't give me opioids, went to the dentist, woke up and the dentist had given them fentanyl, and they were furious. They were furious. People that are dependent, there is a dependency that folks can have physiologically to opioids like alcohol. A certain percentage of people are more likely to develop a dependency, and it's about 3 days that it happens for people with the opioid dependency, and usually they write you a 7-day script. So it's like, to not know, then yeah, everybody's sort of at risk that, I don't know, I hurt my back and went on these meds and now I can't stop. And now the doctor won't give them to me and I'm buying them on the street and I'm ashamed of that. And I might overdose, especially if I'm using alone. That's one of our biggest overdose factors, is that somebody's using alone. There's a call line now, Never Use Alone, that you can call and they will ping you back and they'll trigger 911 if you're not responsive to them in the text line. Leaving the bathroom door unlocked, we tell people that. If I can't get into the bathroom, how do I give you the naloxone? Just having it on site, having it in med kits, easy. There's these cases that in my next role I'm going to work on with bars, because there aren't med kits like this color. Red is very common, orange is common in a safety color. Yellow I see less, and having something bright under the bar that a worker's down there getting cups and pockets of naloxone. Great. If you need to have DL access behind closed doors in a bathroom for condoms, I'm going to put them there too, and I'm also going to have them in the hallway. More is more. And what we really need to do is normalize access. And that's that stigma piece, right? Where we're like, okay, we know anybody could overdose on opioids, but the stigma says it's these people, right? And we don't want them to have Band-Aids because they're poor. And they don't have houses. They don't deserve it. I don't like that loop. So I'm looking for anything but that loop. Does anybody have questions about administering naloxone or anything specific about the medication? I really love the state's videos. They've done a really great job in the last couple years creating short videos. Share them with your friends. I think it destigmatizes just that it's not a complicated thing to give and have. The libraries are all doing it differently. Some of the libraries just have it grab and go on the counters, and some libraries want you to ask for it. I like to make signs like this that tell you what's in the bag, including life-saving info, right? Because using slower, using less if you came out of recovery, don't mix your drugs. That's like a form of abstinence. Why don't you abstain from alcohol to enjoy your opioids and maybe not overdose as easily? That's a strategy. But yeah, I want to make sure that you all get what you want around naloxone, because I know that is such a distribution is a hotbed. Our co-ops, some of our co-ops and libraries have syringe needle drop boxes. As a transgender person who injected hormones with needles for years, where do we put our needles is a thing for diabetics, for people using lancets, for lots of us. So I'm this is about sharps disposal in general. Hepatitis C lives on a surface for 21 days, and Hep C is one of our top 4 infectious disease that we can do something about in the state. So not putting workers at risk pulling trashes would be great. So just having those drop boxes. Berry City is the only city I know of with large drop boxes around the city that folks can be dropping syringes. The state says you can put, but I wouldn't, 13 gallons in a bin, taped up in your garbage and curbside it. It all gets burned. So as long as it's in a heavy container, like a detergent bottle or something, a hard plastic it won't pierce through, tape it up, mark it as hazardous if you can, and then you can put that in your garbage. So
Please write, do not recycle.
do not recycle. Yes. Yes, thank you. We do not recycle them. But I think about people, I used to play hide and seek when I was a kid, and if my mom was a person who was using injectable substances and keeping that like out of my view, it might have been in her closet. And if I kicked over a 13-gallon bin of what I didn't know and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't even know what this is, I'm just gonna get them in the bin, that's a finger stick. That's like multiple finger sticks. So I like think about the worst case scenario. And then I think about how beautiful it would be to have a place where that mom could come and get food and childcare and other poverty resources and get her medication in a safer way. And we call it an overdose prevention center, an OPC. Burlington's been working years, and we're finally making some movement, and we are gonna get one in Burlington at some point, and it is really gonna help folks access not just reducing overdose and getting better medication, but poverty connection, right? Because people are with so little. But any questions on naloxone? Did that give folks like, yeah.
If you use this on an overdose and it's not a particular overdose, is there harm?
It only works on opioid overdoses. So if, for example, if you knew somebody was using cocaine, and cocaine very might likely have fentanyl in it, you could give them naloxone and still call 911 though, because it could be a heart attack, because stimulants and heart attacks, right? So we don't know what it is, but if we think it could be an opioid, so I assume anybody using pills and powders on the street, anybody using opioids, prescribed or not, who might need that Band-Aid, right? Not just like everybody like, sure, we all could, but we all are not overdosing.
What are the textures?
Those are these, and these are $1 a piece. So we encourage folks to test before every injection, because in a bag, fentanyl does a thing called chocolate chipping, where you can't test the bag and get an accurate, and these are if you're injecting. So if you're using powders and pills, you need like a little water. But these are really accurate. They test for 10 most common of the 100 analogs of fentanyl. So again, harm reduction. And xylozine's a tranquilizer. Fentanyl's an opioid, but xylozine's a tranquilizer. And we've seen an increase in tranquilizers, including xylazine and ketamine, over the last few years. So drug testing is another strategy, and the syringe service programs have full spectrum drug testing that they can help folks test beyond, and so that they can get more than just like, okay, well, it's got fentanyl, how much fentanyl? What type of fentanyl?
Somebody that's maybe 80 to 100 pounds versus another person that's 250 pounds. Is there any danger in that smaller person getting the 4 milligrams?
I've heard people do like a smaller squirt, but that would be a good follow-up question for the syringe service programs, or like a medical provider might have like, and I think we just don't know enough yet. There might be other factors with like, have they eaten? How hydrated are they? Do they have other things in their system? But from everything I've heard, 4 milligram in one nostril is not harmful for any age. Might not feel great, but it's not gonna hurt you. I've seen some people do like a half spray in each nose. It's still going up, I don't think it. But yeah, you could give like a smaller. Any other, yeah?
I think you were talking about trying to give naloxone to somebody in a chair, especially who's slumped, especially a bigger person. One of the things that works is if you have two people, especially, is tip that chair back slowly, and their airway is going to open automatically, and then you lower them to the side, and they'll be in the recovery position.
That's a great tip, yeah. Having a couple people there really can help. And if you're on the street, like usually people gather and they're just waiting for somebody to delegate. And I'm like, do not waste time. There's 3 things to do. Check that they're unconscious, call 911, give naloxone, and then stay with them, right? Like, we don't just want to leave somebody there when they're in that recovery position. Might be nice to have some water. People come out of overdose in lots of different ways. For some folks, they're like groggy. Some folks are a little like annoyed, and you just kicked them off their high. They might not remember. They might not believe you. Don't argue with them. Don't argue. Why would you argue? Encourage them not to take more opioid. I like the line of don't waste your drugs, because I just gave you this medication that those opioids are not going to be able to get where you want them to go. In 30 to 60 minutes, though, when that naloxone wears off, you're going to overdose again, because you've just put more opioid in your system, and it's going to flood back when the naloxone wears off. So don't waste your drugs. Don't waste is a good, like, yeah, I don't want to waste my drugs. Any other? Yeah.
The overdose prevention kits, I'm on the board at the library.
Oh, yep.
And so I'm just wondering about how to access those.
Yeah.
And if they're available through the state, maybe the Department of Libraries. I mean, that probably is who I should be going to.
Yeah,
I'm just wondering.
the state for sure. Take my card and I'll connect you with the people that run the program. They're like backpack style, and we use them at the bar. It's great because they can put other stuff in it and it doesn't flag. These ones we've been getting to, which I actually like also for the bars because it's clear what it is. But those have the 8 of the fentanyl and the xylazine test strips, the info, 2 of the naloxone. And yeah, I think many of our libraries are doing it, and it's been really great. Yep, and there's other stuff like we've given some of our libraries, we have an HIV self-test kit that is an oral swab kit that's in English and Spanish. It's one of our best Spanish resources, and both Springfield and St. Johnsbury libraries, we've found people at libraries that really needed HIV testing, that kit saved their life. Like, that's high impact for like low-hanging fruit.
Thank you. That's helpful. Appreciate it.
Also happy to cut out
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, and your local substance use, Ella is here representing the state. Oh, yeah. Yes.
You have cards with you too?
I don't, but I can give you my email.
Okay, great. All right, I'll connect you before we go.
Cool, so we'll talk more about like naloxone. It's one of multiple strategies. There's lots of tools out there. And I wanted to also get a little bit more into what is harm reduction from a broader scope, because it's both practices and principles. Naloxone's a practice. Syringe service programs, SSPs, that's a practice. Like, those are really practical things that we can be doing. Condoms, seat belts, bike helmets, that's all harm reduction. Harm reduction's literal. We're reducing harm. There's always gonna be harm. We're never safe, but we can be safer. So people that are, whether they're recreationally using substances or not, these are just like my general core relationship building for me is like what I do as a harm reductionist for the last 35 years is connecting with people around sex, drugs, and harm reduction through sometimes identity, but sometimes through behavior stuff and party culture. So it's like meeting people where they're at and not leaving them there is like the old tenant. I like and dream the future with them. We don't dream enough. We tell you what's available to you based on your situation. Oof. People keep asking me what people-centered care is, and that's also literal. We center the person before their identity, their behavior, or their situation. When 7 Days was running an article a couple months ago about Decker Towers, do folks know that housing facility in Burlington? It's mostly elder. There's some folks with varying layers of mental wellness needs, and it's on a pathway, and there's people in deep poverty, so people are selling drugs that live in deep poverty housing facilities. and there was a lot of traffic of people using drugs, and 7 Days ran an article, Decker Tower against the drug users. Calling somebody a drug user dehumanizes them immediately. They're a person who uses drugs. They might be a person with substance use disorder. That's not for me to say. So the way that we talk about people, I think it was Owen, I'm gonna call out Owen, in one of the follow-up news articles, I think you said people dealing with addiction. Like, I don't use the word addiction in general population because not everybody uses that word and it can be really stigmatizing. I might not think I have a problem. So if you're using the most extreme language with me, that's a really hard place to leap. If I want to talk about race with people, but I'm only framing things in white supremacy, that's a big gap to close, right? So it's like, how do we start that conversation with our relationship, with where we're at? And there's no shame in where we're at, right? So deconstructing shame at every loop, including for ourselves. I love my body, my choice is a tenant, and I think it really applies to substance use also. What I'm doing with my body is my choice at every turn. Every turn. Sometimes adults and other people are making choices for me. I should always be asked, centered, and be leading those conversations with all the choices that are available to me. And we don't always give people all their choices, right? Sometimes we say, you can do this or not do that. That's a choiceless choice. So giving people a range of options is part of what harm reduction is. If they want those resources. Some folks are like, I'm good. You might give somebody naloxone and they come back to and you're like, I called 911, the EMTs are coming, and they're like, I'm good, I'm leaving. Okay. And you did your good job as a Samaritan. You called 911. Because if they didn't wake up and they died, right? Like, I would rather they wake up, they're mad, and they leave. Like, that's fine, I can deal with that. Dignity, compassion, and respect are my core of harm reduction, that we're meeting people with dignity. I don't like when people on Medicaid get the worst version of everything. You get a worse surgery, you get the worst meal with the free meal programs, you go to the food bank, and it's like the bottom of the barrel of the food. I would like to see that model reversed, that we lean into abundance, that we have plenty, and we could have more, and we need to relocalize resources. We have a lot to share, and that's really individual. I am not somebody who buys food for people that don't have housing. I don't give out money on the street. I make that choice as an individual, and it's actually something I like self-talk, think about as I'm on the streets. And maybe someday I'll change that practice, and I thank people that do that, but for me, that's not the choice that I'm making to help combat poverty. I'm yelling at every institution I can with creative designs. I would love for us to deal with wastewater issues and public bathroom access. It's one of the reasons why people without housing in Burlington are defecating on stoops. Businesses have gotten very mean to people living on the street that have nothing, that need a bathroom and food. And it's not that business's job, it's the city's. So when I see media like 7 Days running a story pitting the two groups of people against each other, that's inappropriate. They don't have any power, neither of them. Who does is the city. So we need those institutional step-ins. And in the meantime, what can we all do? We can talk about each other in a people-centered way. My friends still use words that are racist and ableist. I still do. Like, I can stop that behavior, right? So sometimes a lot of the work is in our head, but what's running through our head comes out in our actions. And it can be really hard to see things on the street that are hurtful, that are different, that are uncomfortable. And what I'm seeing as a response is people immediately calling the police if they're uncomfortable about something. And then the police in Burlington are sending 3 to 4 police cars for that one person. 3 to 4. That's an over-response. So I don't like this direction, and I'm like, we need to try so much else. I don't have answers, but I have a lot of questions, and I know that we're doing stuff in our communities. Everyone is a unique individual. We are all so different. That's why we need a spectrum of options. Roz gave a great connect. You all have a great, Gifford is an awesome hub for medical access. You have great health department workers. Our health department comes in and out and does vaccine clinics. Hepatitis A and B have been on the rise through the years. Having vaccine access is life-saving harm reduction for a lot of folks. So when we do pop-ups, I'm like, what else can we bring out? The state gives out condoms and lube. Not to a lot of us, though. Only like 8 of our orgs get that from the state. So now you need a prescription to get insertive female condoms. As of 2 or 3 weeks ago in the state, you have to get a prescription for those condoms, but we still get them for free from the state. So we need those Band-Aids. The more we give them out, the more we're gonna get them. So that's another reason to give out naloxone and make sure it's getting, we know it's working. We know overdoses are going down. So we've talked about a little bit about stigma as we're going with people-centered language. I was thinking about the difference with when we're modeling language, when I'm in a general audience using words like people who use drugs. That's a big umbrella for recreational and medical drug users that I can talk to everybody about naloxone and not assume who's gonna need it. And I'm not using language that might turn somebody off who's like, well, I'm not an addict, so I'm like, this isn't for me. I don't wanna be in recovery, this isn't for me. I don't wanna be sober, this isn't for me. It's like, well, but take the Band-Aid. And when we're in those one-on-one interactions, though, mirroring what that other person uses, because when we hear the language we use, it is very powerful. That could be about our identity. I love hearing my they/fear pronouns, those neo-pronouns. I love when the news is covering our events and uses, at the queer critical mass bike ride. I'm like, I love that I got the news to say the word queer. I love that. Check. But we get to choose the words we use because my body, my choice. So sometimes we can say, what words are you using for your recovery? I hear folks use sober for alcohol and clean for heroin, but not across the board. I hear a lot of heroin users use the word junkie. You can. You're the person with lived experience. You get to choose that word. But if I'm not somebody using heroin, that's not a word for me to reclaim and take back, right? So that can be a fine dance, and I just err on the side of like, let's just use neutral language. We don't need to medicalize people, institutionalize them. Was it Roz that gave the bleak conditions rats? I don't know why we're doing all these things with rats. I'm like, we know we are living in bleak conditions. Have you met the news? We spend a lot of time doing surveys and research to tell us what we already know. And what we're not doing is investing in institutional change and using that energy to call on the institutions for change, for food, for housing, for public toilets. That's the city. That's wastewater issues. You can't swim in Burlington because the septic overflowed into the lake. Why are we storing poop in tanks at the water? There's a lot of things we're doing to the planet that are affecting our health. So seeing syringes out there on the streets, like that is affecting our health. It's affecting our morale. It's affecting our vibrant communities that we look at it as a bleak condition indicator. We're on the bad path. Things are getting worse. Things are bleak, right? So keeping hope up in those moments can be really hard. I am filled with hope, though, and I see great change in our communities. I actually talk about Bethel as inspiration for the rest of the state, especially with what Owen and Babes Bar have been doing as an anchor point in this community. This community was ripe and ready for this type of intersectional change. So thank you for what you all are doing down here. And I know the work is hard, but I see you all, and I'm constantly referring other towns to each other to learn. Please do not recreate the wheel if the wheel is already out there. Know your resources. And then bystander intervention. Does anybody know this term from sexual violence, domestic violence, bystander intervention? Let me get a sip of water. I think we're doing good on time, right? We go to 7:30? And I'm a fast talker, so please slow me down if you need. I'm gonna go free range again. I love this 2-mic setup. So this is an example of harm. Little blue and little pink person are walking along. Little pink person said, so then I said and stepped on green person's foot. Green person yelled. Knock that off, pink person yells back. It's unfair of you to yell like that. I didn't intend to step on your foot, but you did step on my foot. You're still standing on my foot, but not on purpose. If you want me on your side, you should be more considerate of my feelings. Yelling like that is how you turn allies into enemies. And then pink person, what a jerk, that green person, and yellow person has permission to come and stand on the other foot. I have literally heard you're turning allies into enemies. Personally, I don't want allies, I want accomplices. I want people who are gonna stand between me and people who wanna cause me harm because I'm a transgender person. I'm looking for those people. I love people coming and waving rainbow flags at our pride parades. That is great ally work. I want people standing with rainbow flags out front of the drag queen story hour so 9-year-olds can hear stories without Nazis yelling at them. Because that's happening in Vermont everywhere. And it's unbelievable what some of these grown adults are yelling at children. Not okay. So again, hundreds of community members are coming out and standing and welcoming and cheering on those littles, right? So that's a good bystander intervention. The blue person here, they're sort of smiling and then they're like, what's happening? And then they're like, I don't like it. I don't like it at all. But they don't say anything. They say nothing. So that blue person's a bystander. They're observing and watching the situation happen. And there's so many places where we could have interrupted harm. They could have just gotten off that person's foot and said, I'm sorry. They don't need to over-apologize. When people get mispronounced, we see that a lot with that over-apologizing with, oh my gosh, but I'm trying so hard, but all these things, and that's my feelings, right? Then it's becoming about me. So then that person might feel bad. It's okay, it's all right, don't worry about it. I see this play out with people with substances every time I walk down the street in Burlington. In fact, somebody was having dinner with a friend and said, hey, can I ask you a question? A fight just broke out on the street over here and I immediately called the cops. I think I did the good thing. What do you think? I was like, where do we begin? I don't know what was going on in that interaction on the street. People are yelling on Church Street all the time. People fight all the time. Interpersonal violence is the most common type of violence. Stranger danger happens, but it's most likely the people most around us that are gonna hurt us and harm us. A lot of the gun violence is interpersonal or the police. So all of those low resource harm cycles are gonna keep happening if we keep taking all the resources from people that have nothing. You don't have housing, oh, you shouldn't have food. Oh, you don't have food, oh, you shouldn't have Medicaid. Not yelling at people on the street, not immediately calling the police, engaging with kindness, meeting your neighbors, resourcing yourself up to understand when an overdose is an overdose, if somebody's unconscious and what I could do. Like, that could make you feel better walking around the streets, that I feel a little bit more prepared personally, that even if I don't carry naloxone, I know where I can find it in my town, and I'm gonna call 911 and there's no warrant on my life, so I actually would be somebody who they could call in as a bystander to like, hey, can you call 911 because I have a warrant? Sure, tap me in, I'll stay with them, no problem, right? Like, everybody has different needs, and if you're with people that are using drugs, they might have active warrants. I work with sex workers a lot, they are arrested a lot. I work with community de-escalators that do climate activism. They're arrested a lot. So when we're out doing safety teams, sometimes some of those folks need to get off site first, right? So that bystander could step in and do all sorts of stuff. But I look at naloxone as one of those bystander opportunities that we can step in if we need to. I might even just hand it off to somebody else that's going to administer it. And that's what I like best personally. This chart I really love. I'm going to share the slide. Oh, I already did with Owen, so if folks want an emailed version. This is a good use of a hierarchy where we are differentiating at the levels of where we can ask appropriate conversations. At the cultural level, and this is actively happening, there's a discriminatory cultural belief and message that queer people and trans people are unnatural and wrong. We're seeing it play out at the institutional level with discriminatory practices, trans patients being denied access to care. We're seeing it play out at the interpersonal level with harmful messages, being bullied. And then we're seeing it played out at the individual level where my self-talk is, I'm worthless and I shouldn't be here. There's a reason why our community experiences suicide more than most, including our teens. And there's nothing more heartbreaking when somebody's only option they think is suicidality. Again, my body, my choice, and I really do believe that folks should have access to humane exiting of this planet if it's the only choice, right? So giving all those other options and helping explore that. But if they're isolated, that's one of the top suicide in, like, if you are isolated. So we say connection is what staves off dependency, suicidality, connection. So that's on all of us. That's on us to connect to ourselves. What are we saying in our own heads? Where are we spending our time and energy and money? How are we out and open about who we are, right? Like, we're all fantastic. I'm about as free as I can be until all of you are. And then the interpersonal level, when somebody gives you that intimate information or needs resources, how do you center and uplift them? So we all have that interpersonal power. Does anybody have institutional power in the room? I do. Is anybody like a policymaker, media maker, make handbooks? A lot of us have institutional power, and we hold the culture up. We hold it up. So right now we're letting it crush us down, but to lift it up, again, that harm reduction, grassroots, bottom lifting, what can we do as a community that I don't need to pick a bad strategy that I just keep watching fail? I've just keep watching institutional failure, and I want to know what I can do as a person. I know I can treat my neighbors nicer. I live next to an elder who has to call the ambulance a lot. She falls a lot and needs assistance getting back up. And we, through the years, have made sure that she has our phone numbers. We have check-ins, like, how do we increase our, like, connection with each other in our neighborhood? And that's really awesome that we can do that. And in these small communities, we can much easier than in the big cities, but it applies there too, right? Niceness. So here's some support and resources. You have Gifford and Roz with your treatment services for folks that are ready and want recovery. There is a pill now for alcohol recovery too, which there's a pill for everything. The one substance that we're not prepared for in Vermont is called meth. We have watched a devastating toll of this drug that causes psychosis blast through this country, and we are the final stop on the meth train. We have begged for stimulant support for years in our drug communities, and we've not gotten it. So what we don't have is treatment for meth specifically. When people are using meth, they might also be having a lot of sexual activity, and we see a lot of HIV with meth use. And it doesn't matter if you're gay, if you're looking to get your drugs, you might be having a lot of sex for your drugs. And so getting folks access to both recovery and care for sexual health, again, that sex, drugs, and harm reduction is the core of what we do. I expect people are using multiple things. But for opioids, the treatment centers are great, and there's a lot of options for folks. We lead the nation with the hub and spoke model, came out of Vermont, and it's been a really dynamic watching it grow. The Center of Vermont team has a prevention coalition that has about, oh gosh, they must have 40 to 60 different, our like transit hub in Montpelier is involved. I'm just like, this is incredible because everybody has something that they can participate in. And so all these really dynamic conversations and learnings and skill ups and resource sharing, we're like, wow, we have so much. We have great syringe service programs. Vermont Care serves from Rutland to Newport, St. Johnsbury to Burlington, and then H2RC, the HIV Hep C resource centers in Lebanon, and they serve the New Hampshire and Vermont edge of that zone. And then AIDS Project of Southern Vermont, APSVT, is Bennington and Brattleboro. Brattleboro sees everything before the rest of the state. 91 is a major drug entry point, runs right up on the coast. So Brattleboro sees it before a lot of the rest of us do. They were the first group to get a drug testing full spectrometer because it was really helpful for all of us to know what was coming into Brattleboro, gave everybody else a little bit ahead of time. Having rural access to naloxone, we got a donation from a southern group. It's a nalox box. It's a newspaper-style, white, standalone naloxone box that you can put, I think, about 80 double packs of these. We gave it to Owen and Jesse. Was that like late May, I think? We spent about 5 months looking for a Burlington site to house it. Our Turning Point Recovery Center said no. Our syringe service program, Howard Center Safe Recovery, said no. Our building said they would criminally come after us if we were giving out naloxone. That was a no. We couldn't find anywhere in Burlington. I knew Babes wanted it. And how many you've given out? So many. 3 times. So that's incredible. Like, that folks are taking it and using it. Again, because alcohol's in so many overdoses, it's a great place. And when people are like, what do you mean bar outreach? I'm like, I go to bars and I give stuff out, like condoms and lube and naloxone, like a fairy. And to have it there all the time and not just during our queer dance party has been life-saving. So I'm so grateful for Babes. We leave condoms and HIV self-test kits there. We, in the future, have talked about having full-on harm reduction vending machines. Bottle of water oftentimes is life-saving for folks. What about Plan B? In New Hampshire, Plan B is given out for free by their health department. It's $50 at the pharmacy. I constantly shame Vermont that we're not doing that. Very rarely is New Hampshire doing something that we're not, and I'm like, hi, Plan B. We talked a little bit about Barrie and their sharps disposal community bins, and Burlington working on the overdose prevention center. We've got incredible legal teams in Vermont. The ACLU for decades has been supporting sex workers with legislation for decriminalization. Our legislation in Vermont is both drugs and sex work, and somebody's gonna go, and Vermont is one of the states that's close to decriminalization. My body, my choice. Why are you worried about what I'm doing and that you're arresting me on the spot, that my therapist is calling and getting me institutionalized because I say I do sex work? Like, that is not okay. Vermont Legal Aid is a great support. There is a queer lawyers group that's bloomed up. And the law school here, Vermont Law School, is a great treasure trove of legal access. So I know that supporting migrant folks came up in one of your other topics too, and I am furious and constantly asking people why they're not tending their Latinx workers. Seasonally, there's a lot of Latina folks that come into the state for ski areas, and our agriculture is our #1 human trafficking in Vermont is through agriculture. So it ain't sex worker, sex trafficking, it's agricultural trafficking. I've met Mexican farmers living in inhumane conditions in Vermont, and those are just the ones that I meet. It's unacceptable. We could do so much better, and I really could see us leading like the country with what we could be doing, right? Because we're so creative. Increasing mutual aid in the community efforts, localizing everything. If you got a hammer and I need a hammer, can I borrow your hammer? Supporting small businesses. I grew up in Mexico, Maine. If anybody knows rural Maine, Walmart came to my town and did what they do, and they shut down every small business. Walmart will eventually leave. I will not shop at Walmart. I hate going into that building. All of my friends still shop at Walmart and Amazon. But it's their choice, right? I'm still gonna shame them about it. I yell at them for wearing army camo. I'm like, what team are you on? There's lots of great realty. And where can we call on institutions for actual whole systems of care and addressing poverty? In Vermont, we have so much access to our legislators. We are very, very different than most places. I have heard from the floor of the State House that letters from constituents are power. We might be the only state with that type of power. And that they already think we're weirdos, right? I wish our health department could have, I don't know what the answer is, made different decisions. We lost 80% of our funding at the Pride Center in our health and wellness programs over 5 months because of who we serve. I lost half of my job. I've had coworkers lose their jobs. We will not be able to do outreach. I don't even know what that's gonna look like, but that's all of our cancer funding. We've lost tobacco funding, health equity funding, HIV funding. We're not gonna get that from the feds in the state. And we're gonna need to get that from our communities. And there's plenty of money in Vermont. I'm like, I know lots of people giving to HRC. They're a good national org, but what about giving local? Like at the most local level. It doesn't have to be $1 to this person, but like where can we? I join every co-op I can. I have privilege with money as a poor kid who makes like $47,000 a year. I'm okay. I pretty much only shop at co-ops. I spend all my money on food, and I join as many as I can because I really value for $10 a year that I can get cheap nuts at Rutland Co-op. So like, I love that they're there. That's worth $10 a year to me. So I just do the math and weigh it out, and I'm like, I don't know, is it worth it to me? Do I have the money? Can I round up? I give extra when it's outright. I shamed somebody. I heard her behind me in line. She was like, well, who's the roundup for? And they were like, outright. And she was like, yeah, no thanks. And I turned around and I said, how could you? It's Pride Month. There's a time to use shame. But she didn't give any money, so it didn't help. But it was fun for me. I consider it shame and glitter. I've got business cards up here. I am a random person out here in the field. I've lived in Vermont for a lot of years, and I've worked rurally across Vermont for several years, and I really, what's happening rurally, Burlington is jealous of. So what we're doing here is a microcosm, and I don't take that lightly. I studied dialogue in my master's degree, and the power of a room coming together and something new emerging out of the group, that's dialogue. And like, we're so creative. I know your next one is on community justice? Restorative justice, which will be a great closer one. I brought a bunch of different resources for you all beyond the state pamphlets, including lots of naloxone. There's this little fentanyl mini-zine that came out of San Francisco some years ago. My teammate made a what to know about drugs with some of the common drugs, including stimulants and meth. And then we have an HIV and PrEP basics with everything you need to know about HIV, which a lot of things people think they know about HIV is actually hepatitis C risk. I have a lot of friends that cut each other's hair. That's razor sharing. So talking about cleaning your razors, toothbrushes. If you're living with somebody with hep C, that is a really easy way because it lives on surfaces for so long, the blood, that it's really easy to pass around through objects you might not think, like combs and brushes. So it's not always needles. And I always talk about HIV and hep C together because it's unbelievable the lack of stigma with hep C, with how good the treatment is. And HIV treatment's incredible. That I am standing here, I had 5 T cells and almost died. Like, I can't believe I'm still standing here. The meds work, and I take them every day. Hep C, there's such a lack of stigma. People are just like, yeah, I just tell people I have Hep C, and they decide if they want to share my needles. Yeah, I'll just get treatment. And it's like, it could be that casual with HIV, but it's the stigma. Because who got AIDS? Gay men and drug users. And when I got AIDS, people asked me, how did you get it? Because I'm either gonna feel bad for you or blame you because you deserve it. And those are my friends. I was like, ooh, ooh. Yeah. I brought 2 packs of naloxone and then a bunch of loose ones. And I also brought one of my favorite sets of articles is by an author, Tema Okun, who's crafted out the white supremacy characteristics, which are perfectionism, sense of urgency, defensiveness, quantity over quality, worship of the written word, paternalism, either-or thinking, power hoarding, fear of open conflict, individualism, right to comfort, objectivity, and progress being bigger or more. So we put them on a bingo card with other things to choose. I'm a director. I paternalize all the time. And I look at my bingo card, take space, make space. Great, let me get my hair out of this conversation. It can be hard in the moment to pick a different thing, and I think the more that we identify where we're doing the things we don't want to do, and for me, it's extra incentive if it leads back to anti-racism work. It's extra. If it's lifting classism out, extra incentive. So I brought some of those bingo cards, which are fun, with the link to Tema Okun's article. She goes deep into stuff and talks a lot about fear. When people tell me they're afraid, I ask, what are you afraid of? One time somebody said, I'm afraid my legislator won't follow through. I was like, oh, that's your fear? Like, I don't want to minimize your fear, but my people are being slaughtered on the streets. Like, we're being hunted down. So, like, what are you afraid of? But what are you afraid of is a really important question, because a lot of us do have fear. And fear is not a bad thing. Getting cozy with discomfort, we all got to do that. That's what education's about. How am I going to learn if I'm always comfortable? Everything's good. This guy the other day in Burlington was like, I'm just shocked that you're experiencing more homophobia on the streets. He's like, you know, I'm a cisgender heterosexual guy. I look around and everything's fine, everything's good, y'all got this. I was like, well, that's your privilege. And he was like, and what can I do? Because he also knew his perspective didn't pick up, like, where can I plug in? So I was like, well, I'll give you a short list. But he was somebody who gave money to people on the street and also bought food for people. And so I loved that I could also celebrate him for that. We're always more than just the one thing. Minimizing people down to one thing, that's not holism. I always look for commonality in relationship building. Yep, we're gonna get there, more in common than not. I always believe people. Again, SVDV 101. Why am I not gonna believe what you're telling me? If I don't believe you, how are we gonna build a relationship? I've worked with young people that use so much OxyContin. Wow, they told me great stories. Some of them might have happened. I don't know. It doesn't even matter for me. But that we were building trust and I was listening to them and centering them, we were able to build deep relationship. And when they were in crisis, when they were flipping out and wanted to take their own life, I could take them outside and they could take their shoes off and they could ground in the grass and I could just be there with them silently because they trusted my presence, right? Sometimes we don't need to say anything, but just be there next to someone. Not even touching them sometimes, just being there. So that's really powerful interpersonal work, but it takes a lot of individual work. Coming in cool and calm is very complicated. But if you approach a crisis and you're escalated up like this, please don't approach the crisis. You will only make it worse. When I see the cops coming in to defuse a mental wellness crisis with guns and whistles ablazing, I don't think it's helping. I think it's actually harming. I would love to see more investment in street outreach teams. I don't know if folks know Pathways Vermont. Pathways is a great peer-to-peer outreach group for mental wellness and substance use and all sorts of poverty gaps. They just lost their community center in Burlington This happens all the time. We're using residential buildings in commercial capacity, and because they only had one bathroom, and with the lack of bathroom access in Burlington, they flooded their building, basically, shut down a septic. People were flushing syringes. They don't have anywhere to bring them. So now folks that were relying on that daily access are all over the streets now too. There's nowhere to go. Sometimes they can go to the library. The parks are policed. It's like, where can people go? Where can you go? Yeah.
You reminded me of instead of calling the police for something that some people would consider, would make them afraid, figuring out a way to deal with it productively yourself. I have a friend in Eugene, Oregon, which has a huge homeless population, and there are like camps of people living in tents, which the city is apparently not doing very much about. My friend used to live in Indiana, and so he started a huge garden in his place in Eugene, so they have tons of vegetables growing, and they have chickens in the middle of the city, which people complain about, but never mind. He has 2 daughters who are junior high age, and they came home from school one day, and there were people from the encampment in their yard taking vegetables and eggs. And they were afraid, right? Who are these people taking our stuff? And my friend Jim decided, instead of calling the police and saying these people were there, he went over to the encampment and said, you know what? I'm sorry, I know you need things, but you know, my daughters are home by themselves and it was frightening them. How about if every week when I have extra vegetables and eggs, I bring them over here for you guys? Which he started doing, and started then developing relationships with some of these people. And for instance, now when he has time, he'll drive somebody to the doctor, or he'll, you know, help somebody get on the internet so they can contact family members or whatever. And all he had to do was that moment of, you know, I trust you guys not coming in my yard, and you trust me to bring you what I have that's extra, because they have extra. And he said it's worked out great all the way around, and that's a pretty simple thing to do, right? And I don't know, I mean, a lot of us, I know, take vegetables and stuff to the food bank and so on, but just instead of saying, oh, I'll call the police, my daughters are in danger, like, what is the situation here, and how about I go talk to these folks about what they need?
Yeah, I love that. And I think especially when we're not in the heat of a moment, those conversations are more available to us, that we're going in with. I have a huge tool belt. I grew up in a hardware store, but I have a lot of tools too. And I approach a situation like improv, that I don't know what I'm gonna need, but I've got a lot of different things that I could bring, or I might tap it to somebody else in the room. And I've practiced that outside of crisis situations. So I love role play. I love running through a scenario. Is anybody a camper? Or if you're like packing for a trip, do you run through like all the possible scenarios of like, well, what if it rains and I need these shoes, and then I go to dinner, but I can't wear those on the beach, and it's like your scenario running, right? You could do that with scenarios that might happen. What would I do if I came across somebody who was unconscious on the street? Like, I don't check every person on the street that I walk past who looks like they're sleeping or unconscious, but sometimes I ding at them or yell at them or look for like an indicator. It takes all of us, so if we're all doing pieces and having those creative conversations, especially in your community, that you're generating these lists. We sort of know the gaps. People need food, people need housing, people need healthcare, probably a handful of other things. I would include fresh water, education, air. Community meals work. I would love to see more intersectional meal spaces. We've really siloed ourselves in class, especially in Vermont, and having food is something we all need. And some people can pay and some people don't need to, and everybody getting a great meal. And then your job is to connect with each other. And what if you had a mutual aid board that this person needs a ride on Tuesdays to Gifford? Gosh, I already go to Gifford on Tuesdays. But how would I know that if we're never in the same room, right? So creating those spaces, I think, is the next step of mutual aid, where really localizing our resource sharing. A lot of the libraries do it now too, with the tools and the sewing machines. How innovative, thank you. Any other questions or things that you wanted more info on or didn't get that you were like, I really want this about harm reduction? There's 2 books that I highly recommend. One is by Dr. Carl Hart. He's a scientist, doctor, dad, and drug user, and he wrote a really great book on drug use for adults. And Shira Hassan's Saving Our Own Lives. It's a harm reduction compilation. It's maybe a year or 2 old and has a lot of really inspiring stories about what other groups are doing. Something that's been really helpful at the Pride Center of Vermont, especially as we have stood with migrant justice, we've stood with Palestine. How do we know how we're gonna act, in what ways? And we've leaned into our values. We actually created a set of values just for the Burlington Pride Fest, including localism. It's helped us take corporations and big business out of our Pride Parade. You don't match our values. Not sorry. I will not say I'm sorry. It's a no. But knowing your values as a person, as a community, anchoring yourself in those things, and then how do those play out? You can have that aha awakening, but then you have to practice the action to embody it. And that's the work that's hardest for folks, I think. And then you just fall back into the pathway that you always have, which is that negative loop. I don't know what else to do, so I'm calling the cops. I don't know what else to do. I don't know what else to do. I don't know what else to do. And if that's my only option, but I think we can vote our money into the pockets we really want. I believe in our towns. I think if our towns can come out and vote for $600,000 extra dollars for the police in Brattleboro, that our towns could also come out and vote for $600,000 for housing and food. I really think we could. Show me your town budget. I'll tell you where to cut the fat, right? So you all have that power within this community to ask those institutions. Look at what's in your town budget. I hate when my friends tell me don't vote for the school budget because it's a strategy. No, it's against my values. Any other questions or? My business cards are here. Please feel free to follow up. Vermont Care's mobile app, they do mobile distribution. They'll bring supplies to folks, including doing pickups for disposal. And then they've got naloxone. They also have safer smoke and snort kits. So if somebody doesn't want to inject, but they want to use harm reduction and snort instead, that's an option. They have all sorts of different supplies at different times for folks. They also have free needles and syringes for hormone injecting for trans folks, which we've worked with them for a few years to have access to. So that's been really great.
How to normalize or desensitize when we see somebody on the street that's behaving erratic or looking like they're homeless or in need, how to not be afraid and how to find a safe way to check in and see how they are and to treat them as a human and not as something to be afraid of, like objectifying. And I know for me it's a new experience. I don't know what to do. Like I've been in more populated areas of the States and it scares me to death. I don't even want to look because I don't want, I just don't know.
Totally.
So I'm just wondering what's out there to help small communities like this, me, to become more open and compassionate and a resource.
Yeah, and you named something with the unknown, the fear of the unknown. When we know somebody, we know this is just how they are. When we don't know, we assume the worst. And part of that is because that's what the media spins toward us, that we need to be afraid of strangers. Again, most violence is interpersonal. Those are the people around you. So you might want to be somebody who connects with them. I'm somebody who's petite, and I always encourage people never walk at night alone. Like, again, SVDV 101, like all these strategies that we used to use with buddy systems, if I'm gonna go check on somebody, I might wanna bring a buddy, especially if they're potentially overdosing and we need to like get them down in a position or call 911. I think there's a good example around just meeting them and having like outreach teams are out there just meeting folks, and often they'll do it with like a bottle of water or a sandwich, like an offering that literally a carrot, like, because who are you, right? Like, they're just a person. Fear is a very intimate, Pema Chodron's book on fear, The Places That Scare You, very beautiful book about going into fear places, and the right to comfort is such a thing we've crafted up with, like, who's safe and how are they safe? And are you really safe? When we know things, that helps us feel safer, whether it's like how to respond to the potential things that this person might need, or just that we're safer knowing your name and this is your corner and what are you doing here? I saw somebody outside of Babes one night. I had an interaction with a local. He came barreling into the parking lot, got out of his truck, got in the window outside immediately on his phone, filming in the windows. And I went up to him and I was like, hey buddy, can I help you? And he turned around and immediately started yelling at me and told me he was gonna call the cops, was screaming at me and told me to get away from him. Said, okay, just like dance party and like just checking in. And then he yelled at me some more, got in his car, and like very unsafely drove out of the yard. And I didn't call the cops. I went in and Babes, and I was like, do you know this local? And they were like, oh yeah, that's da 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 da, and he always does that. If I was a different person, though, I might have responded differently. If I was somebody who had experienced trauma from a man, and a man flipped on me like that, I might have a knife, I might have a gun, I might have pepper spray, I don't know. But I checked in with him, right? And then he escalated. So what I do when people escalate is I make space. I don't let them into a closed space with me. I never, ever open the door at the Pride Center and let somebody in and ask what they need. What do you need on the street? Oh, you're escalating. You're definitely not coming into the space now, because it's really hard to get somebody out, especially if they have a weapon and I'm in there alone. Being in public spaces, not taking it personal, not making it your work, not being the savior, not drawing extra attention if you don't need to. Like, I don't know, why are you worried about that guy? Like, is he doing anything? Or this person, is any like harm happening? Does anybody know the ladder of inference? I love this psychology tool and its assumptions, beliefs, observable data. We rarely ever go back down to observable data. The ladder of inference. So I act out of my assumptions. I act out of my beliefs. I rarely act out of observable data, and that's where we need to get back to, where it's like, okay, I'm gonna take a deep breath, I'm gonna relax, I'm gonna look around. Are they conscious? Are they yelling? Do they have any visible weapons? Cool myself down. Or like, if I'm not cooled down, I'm just getting out of there. Like, I don't need to put myself into situations. I had a friend who was almost assaulted on the bike path with a machete. 2 people tried to box him in when he was biking. Luckily, he was quick on his bike and could get out of there. But I kept thinking we should never be alone at night, especially right now. Any of us, because you just don't know. And if you're alone, you're more likely to experience violence. It's one of the reasons I want to see more of the tent cities. There's one in Montreal that's been very, like, I don't know the story behind it, but there's a large, very visible encampment in downtown Montreal. And White River Junction has had some interesting, like, projects happen with temporary housing being built. It's a tent. Planned ignoring. Don't look at it. Don't worry about it. Are they hurting you? Look away. I love planned ignoring. It's my strategy for so many things. I know that's happening, but I'm not looking at it. But if you do want to engage, right, like then there's a whole other set of tools. Sometimes it's like I'm just going to walk past and then let somebody else know. And I know in my community who's an outreach worker or who has that resource. That's part of that, like, know who's in your community. I love knowing who in my crowd is a street medic. I can't identify plantain in a park, and at the Burlington Pride Fest 5 years ago, someone got a bee sting, and because I am who I am, somebody brought this person to me, and I'm like, I can't identify plantain. I'm in Burlington. I don't know herbalists here. I live in Montpelier, where there's herbalists every 10 feet. Ice, honey, vendors. I was like, what else can bee stings? But having those little lists of things, I bring a tick key everywhere in the summertime. I just do. We know there's a lot of ticks. Bring a tick key. Tick checks work. All those like little things. Have your kit if you want that. Did that help with some like, cool. Anybody else have any additional or? Was this helpful? I'm like a very different topic than all your other topics, but I think it's a good like round of pairings because there's no one thing that's gonna work. It's gonna take all of us with everything. That's why I really encourage people to do an audit of your day, your week. Where are you spending your energy? What are you telling yourself in your head? And where are you spending your money?
I wanted to go back to something you said pretty early on about that you don't give money to the people asking. And I have a really hard time, like West Lebanon, at all of the shopping centers, there's always the people with the sign, and I hate just looking away. And I don't know, a couple weeks ago, there were people that were different than the people that usually are there. Usually it's men, and this time it was a man and his wife and a kid. And they were waving to everybody. And smiling. And they had a sign, we have 2 children, we need, and I went past them. And then I turned around and I came back and I gave them money.
Yeah, like something, right? And it's like both of those things can coexist. We are very contradictory humans, right? Like we do sporadic things and that's okay. There doesn't have to be one rhyme or reason. And when I'm like constantly faced with like something doesn't feel good in my gut about this, that's when I make a change of action. And because that litmus of discomfort where I'm like, I'm uncomfortable in a bad way and I could do something differently, what else do I want to do than pick something? It's hard and it's really personal, and there is, other than like poverty getting addressed, I'm just like, these are Band-Aids. We're in so many fixes that have failed, and there's a lot of strategies folks have that Spange that are doing that like spare changing with, like, I used to work at Spectrum with homeless youth, and they would have really incredibly dynamic conversations about like, what are you putting on your sign? What like sidewalks are you going to? Like, who gets there first? Like, what about youth versus adults? Like, there's so many layers of it, and like, I don't know how they do.
Yeah, I just wonder how much money do they actually make doing it?
Yeah.
You never see anybody giving them anything.
I do pretty regularly. I see a lot of folks giving like $1 here, $1 there. I don't know. And I'm like, I do the math and I weigh it out. I'm like, the weight of $1 versus the weight of my conscience. And then maybe every week I know there's going to be 5 people out there, and I keep 5 $1 bills in my car, and $5 a week I'm making a local donation, and I stop giving to this national org, or I save $5 somewhere else. And what I've lifted is the weight of my heart. And I think that's invaluable, right? So I'm like, I don't know, what is like the value of $5 at the end of the day? I think about that with the roundup when I was not doing it. I was like, come on. I can't like 50 cent, 60 cent round up. I hate when my friends don't tip. I hate when my friends under tip. It's like, come on. What's that $1 to you? Yeah.
Shared something sort of interesting with me, and I think it ties into what you were just talking about at Spectrum, as you know, the people who are having these conversations are youth who are homeless.
Yeah.
So how much can they really be making? Think about who's really like wanting to go stand on the corner and ask for money? It's not really something you do unless you don't have a lot of other options. one of which might be selling drugs. So how can you maybe
Right, that might be helping.
to not have to turn, or sex work that they don't want to be doing? Yeah, so I do think that the sort of idea of like how much money can these people be making is sort of like,
Compared to what?
do it? Like, would you go out on the street? I don't know.
I think it ties into that notion of who's unhoused on the streets of Vermont, and there's this conception that people are coming by busloads across country. Who has the money living in deep poverty to take a cross-country adventure trip to move to Burlington, Vermont? Like, maybe somebody, but like the bulk of people are actually Vermonters. They're Vermonters losing their housing. They're Vermonters being thrown out of emergency temporary housing. They're Vermonters. And then you know who's in the institutional power chairs making decisions for them? Not Vermonters. Again, that class conversation that we're not having. So how do we as the communities, because we're all people who live here, how are we calling on the powers to like actually make the change that they have the power to make? None of us in this room have the power for the access things we need to really address the opioid epidemic. That's a poverty symptom. That's an overprescribing symptom of a big pharmaceutical institutional dependency of this country. That's about getting people into all sorts of other levels of care. I think cannabis is a great harm reduction drug. I think there's a lot of plant magic with all sorts of medicinals. We have an herb school in our state. We could be activating and growing medicine. We have a pharmacy in Vermont that makes ketamine. Ketamine's a pharmaceutical. Great, get it local. Thanks, y'all. You're awesome.